Pretty good. How about you?
Yep, not too bad. Okay, morning everybody. Morning, Mike. And welcome to Talking Niagara this morning, and morning, Betty. So I had to come to something. So our listeners are listening, and they're saying good morning to each other, but not to us. Oh dear. Mike says good morning every time, but he's usually here before we start with his good morning. Anyway, welcome everybody, and we
Well,
love you.
maybe they don't like us, but this is maybe they don't like us, but find this is a good opportunity to say good morning and hi to their friends. We just
Yeah,
we
and
just
I don't think it's us, Dave. I think the problem doesn't exist at this end of the line.
oh no,
Anyway, yeah, all
I'm
right,
so
okay.
insulted. I'm so insulted. Oh. Yes, well, somebody out there gave us advice yesterday, and I would give that advice to anyone else. They said they listened to Paul's show on the
Yep.
amalgamation with Chris Regas on Tuesday. I did I normally try to get watch Paul's show when it comes on YouTube. I'll accept Wednesday's show, which talks about the Habs, and I'll give it the cross right here. Anytime I talk about the Habs, I got to put a garlic around me, because they are, of course, the traditional opponents of my beloved Maple Leafs. But anyway,
so it's the did Habs and the make believes, eh?
yeah. But anyway, one of our listeners pointed that out, and I would recommend that anyone go to Voice of Niagara and listen to what Chris Regas has to say about the regional amalgamation. He's very good at. He's watched the region very carefully. He knows its nuances, and I felt I learned something there listening to him. And actually him and Paul, and actually a lot of what they had said is backed up in some of the articles I posted today.
Yeah. Well, there's a heck of a lot of articles on that, but we still got some leftover from yesterday. So the Berger family is including this one. The Berger family is complaining of systemic cover-up in relation to a 911 call that happened. Basically, Ralph Berger was 59, died at his Fonthill home in August of 24. He called 911, and quite how this happened, I don't know. But the family recorded the 911 call, but discovered him the next morning dead. No police, no paramedics were ever dispatched to his home. I would think if you're a 911 worker, this has got to be kind of your nightmare for the day, right? Did I go home leaving a 911 call unresponded to?
Yes. Well, I don't know. Now, the dispatcher did everything right except dispatch somebody to the house. What happened is this fellow seems to have had a heart issue, was able to phone 911, but was not able to do anything like talk.
Yeah.
The dispatcher did hear breathing, but nothing much more. Tried to phone back, but couldn't. Pinged to the location so she knew, or whoever was the dispatcher, he or she, was able to determine the location, but decided, I don't know, because of how much was going on that night, not to dispatch a police officer or a paramedic to the location, which was an error. Now, that itself is bad enough. So that's an error of judgment. So you had somebody phone 911, you couldn't get them back, you pinged them. And it's not really an abundance of caution. It's just ordinary caution. Get somebody over there. You can figure it out really quickly whether somebody is having a problem or not. And so it's not a great intrusion on whatever the police were doing that night. It's not like there was a massive riot or a massive
Yeah.
problem, a
The
weather
question,
problem, or anything of that kind.
the question I have was, why couldn't an officer be dispatched to at least do a wellness check?
Well, that's the whole issue here. That's the mistake they made. But the biggest error, the biggest problem here is it seems that the police understood they had made a problem. They had the problem had occurred. They made a mistake. They made a mistake that may have cost the person their life. We don't know whether or not an emergency vehicle being dispatched would have saved the person's life or not.
Yeah, no, I grant that. Yeah.
Yeah. But the cover up, the cover up is astonishing. When the family tried to get some information on the 911 call, they were rebuked. They were told by the police that nothing went wrong, that everything was done correctly, and nothing to see here kind of thing.
Yeah.
And anytime they pushed the issue, if they got any response at all, it was a weak and deflective, dismissive type of reaction from the police or whatever, whoever is responsible for that. It took a Freedom
Yeah.
of Information Act to get the information, and even then it was refused. So that's the biggest issue I see here is the police have made a mistake, but are loath to admit it, and so much so that they put a big roadblock in the way of the people trying to figure out what's going on. Now, the police have the police or the 911 dispatcher has to come to the conclusion that they've made a mistake, and it's better for everybody to understand that that mistake was made. I'm not saying that anyone needs to be disciplined over it, but it has to be put out there because we have to know how well our dispatch is working, and if they made a mistake, we have to make sure that that mistake is not made again.
Yeah.
And you can't do that if the authorities are more interested in covering up the faux pas rather than addressing it. And as a matter of fact, if they did address it, if they did say, now, okay, we had a problem and we're not going to have this problem again, as soon as word got out that they did that, everyone knew they would have a problem, but they didn't address it at all.
Yeah.
On any level, which is really mismanagement.
Yeah. Obviously, there's a possibility there of a wrongful death lawsuit or other types of civil litigation. A wrongful death lawsuit is really quite hard to prove, but there could well be other types of litigation which would be against the police force and potentially the 911 call center. Obviously, it brings to public scrutiny the level of training of staff and the supervision of staff. That's something that I think should be obvious, whether or not anybody did anything wrong. And is there potential for disciplinary action somewhere down the line?
Well, first of all, you have to address the number one thing is what was in the decision process that caused this mistake to be made.
Yeah.
Right. So that is the first thing that has to be addressed. Obviously, this was a mistake. And we'll be kind here. We'll say it's a mistake. And that mistake has to be remedied. You're not going to remedy that mistake if you keep pretending that nothing happened, that everything went peachy keen during the call. Oh, sorry, we couldn't save his life, but we did everything we were supposed to do, which was a lie. So what's the point? What's the point of lying about something like that?
Yeah.
What you want to do is be a man, suck it up, take responsibility, and fix the problem, and apologize to the people.
Yeah. Yeah. You see, lying about it doesn't help anybody. Not at all.
Yes, and it's not direct lying. What it is obscuring the truth, basically.
Yeah.
And that is the biggest problem I see here. And this was a surprise to me. I understand nobody likes to take responsibility for anything these days. Everybody's looking for somebody to sue or to denounce or whatever. At least that seems to be the way. But here we have a very clear case of the officials, authorities, trying to obscure what happened and deny the family the rightful information of what happened that night, and the process, and if they had done, then they would be able to assure the people and the people of the region how they've done what they've done to remedy that. But to pretend it didn't happen and pretend everything went as like it should have, that is actually, that's kind of almost criminal. Basically, it's like nothing to see here. We don't want to take responsibility. If we keep this on the quiet, then nobody has to know.
Well, like I said at the very beginning,
at the end of the year.
Yeah, like I said at the very beginning, if I was I couldn't do the job of a 911 operator because I'd never go home. I'd be concerned that every call that I took was responded to before I went home, and wouldn't want any of these calls falling through the crack. The trouble is, there's with any job, I suppose it's too easy to say that we become kind of we push away the problems. We kind of become subconscious that we've done the best we can.
Well, maybe you're taking the point of view of the dispatcher here. Now, the dispatcher made a mistake. Now, obviously, the dispatcher did not think that the mistake was made. They did everything right up to that point. They actually even pinged the location. Now, what was in the decision process that made the dispatcher not follow up, do the next step? Was it because the police were very busy that night for any amount of different reasons? But this was a 911 call. So not only could somebody have a medical emergency, somebody could have been threatened by a criminal of some kind. Somebody may have been able to get off a 911 call as they're being tied up or being assaulted or being robbed, but was not unable to get that. You can imagine, let's say a little kid is in a house and some guys break into the house, and the little kid, she hides under the bed and gets a 911, and she puts the 911 out there, but doesn't want to say anything and be discovered under the bed.
Yeah.
So what do? What does dispatch? Well, didn't get any volume there. Nobody talked to me, so nothing must be wrong. Somebody just dialed 911 and stayed on the phone.
And we don't. While we do know that there are people who call 911 needlessly, I think most people understand that 911 call is serious.
Look, I tell you what. Somebody phoned 911 in front of my house once.
Yeah.
I was unaware of it. I was unaware of the 911 call that came to my in front of my house. A police officer showed up and knocked on my door. I opened up and the police were there. So I was a bit alarmed. What are you doing here? And he says, I'm investigating a 911 call that came from here. And I said, no one here has called the 911. He says, maybe it didn't have to be exactly here, but it was pinged in this right here at this location. Maybe not in the house, but around the house. And I said, there's no one here. So I called the kids, whoever was in. He looked at all the phones to see if 911 had been called. It hadn't been. And so he concluded that somebody may have called it out in front of the house. They made a mistake, a pocket dial or whatever. But a cop came to the house.
Yeah.
Right? A cop came. That's my point.
But again, a pocket dial, pocket dials, we get them all the time.
Well, I'm not even sure it was a pocket dial, but somebody phoned 911 and they were either walking down the sidewalk in front of my house or somewhere close to my house on the road. They called it. The ping came back at the location of my house. And the best the cop could say is, I reckon that somebody called it by accident in front of the house, or was moving past the house when they called it, and something like that.
Was a
Pulled over to call it and then moved on. I don't know. But
yeah,
the point here is that
yeah,
it doesn't matter if it was a pocket call. It doesn't matter if it was anything else like that. Somebody, a police officer, came to the door of my house.
yeah,
So
yeah.
why didn't that happen this time?
Agreed. It very good, because obviously, if he knocked on the door of your house and asked about what was going on, at least he could have narrowed it down. If there was somebody dying in your house, they wouldn't have been. If there was a burglary going on in your house, that would have been, maybe they could have caught the suspects. But they narrowed it down at least.
Yeah, they came to the house. They found that there was a ping from the location. He checked the phones that were in at the house. Nobody phoned 911 in the house. He checked that. But the fact of the matter is, he came and he checked.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, and he checked and was able to determine that nobody in the house was in any kind of trouble or needed assistance.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. At least that, it got them. They basically determined on the basis of that response that any further action wasn't necessary. And if it had been called by somebody in a car, let's say, having an issue, then that car would have crashed down the street, wouldn't it?
We don't know. So we never found out what happened.
Yeah,
all they know is they were able to determine that nobody was there was no problem happening in my house, which canceled that out, so that they could look elsewhere for wherever the person who phoned. So basically, that's all there is to it. But they did what they were supposed to do, and in this particular case, they did not.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
If a cop had come to the door like they did to my house, now that was nearly 20 years ago. So it would be about 18 years ago, I reckon, maybe 17 years ago that happened. So there you have it. You know, you have a situation where the system worked properly, and if a police officer had been dispatched to the house, maybe I'm able to quickly determine that there's somebody was in having a problem. But as I said before, the thing that bothers me the most about this is they were given the runaround about what had happened.
Yeah. All right. And the thing is, it is much better in those circumstances, I think, to admit that there was a problem and to look into what was the cause of the problem and fix it.
Yeah. What else do we got out there?
All right. Moving on. Senate committee recommends removing broader immigration powers from the border bill.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. We find that this is happening all over the Western world. Basically, what we have had is a huge spate of illegal immigration, asylum seekers, refugees, etc. And what has been determined that even though many of them, of course, are legitimate, nearly all of them are economic refugees. They're just peeling out, trying to find a better life. So many of them are trying to jump the immigration queue, basically. If you don't have any particular marketable skills, so you're not going to be a candidate for immigration, are you? So if you're from Kenya and you want to come to Canada and you apply immigration and you find, well,
you've only got
a bricklayer. You're a bricklayer, but we don't need any bricklayers. I say, let's just give an example. Oh, we got an abundance of bricklayers in Canada now. We don't need any bricklayers. Sorry, we're looking for accountants or something. Anything like that.
Yeah.
So what they do? Okay, well, they're not going to take me. So I'm going to go. I'm going to seek forgiveness rather than permission.
Yeah.
I've got enough money
Yeah.
to be able to get there, to pay off the people movers to get in, and then I got to play the game. And we know the Canadian border services are weak. We know that the immigration system has always been very weak. And so all we have to do is wait enough time, and sooner or later we'll be allowed to stay here.
But
This is kind of like the system. Like now, we built a system that was supposed to be humanitarian and open to people. And it was built around to respond to tragedies like happened in the Second World War. Well, those kind of tragedies aren't happening anymore. So, but we still act as if they are, and we take people in, and there's a long, cumbersome process. And so they're trying to address that right now. And what is your impression?
Well, these National Security Committee and the Social Affairs Committee have conducted both in-depth study of the bill's immigration measures, and they're concerned. So this is the Senate Affairs Committee wants to basically see the immigration-related sections of the C-12 border bill removed or significantly modified by the Senate's National Security Committee. And so, this modification, what they're basically saying to the government is what you've done is not good enough.
Yes. Well, it says here that since 2018, the refugee claimants in Canada, that is Canada has accepted, has more than doubled since 2018.
Yeah.
The CBC investigation has found that people from some countries have an easier time claiming asylum than others. So that's a problem. And the number of refugee claimants granted asylum in Canada was close to 37,000 in 2023, up from just 14,000 in 2018. That's more than double, basically. Yeah. And are these legitimate refugees? Are they legitimate asylum seekers?
It's a fair question, but the Senate committee report contains several recommendations aimed at addressing questions that they've raised through witness testimony. So they've spoken to people. Clearly, they've spoken to people who've been through the system.
Quite possibly, but as I said before, the system was set up to be more humane than it should. To try to sort of talk about the devil's advocate here, they've been very open to refugees, much more open than we probably should be. Like I said before, the refugee claimant thing was built upon what happened after World War II, when you had an enormous amount of refugees all over the place. And prior to World War II, when you had a lot of people trying to escape countries like Nazi Germany and maybe even Soviet Russia. So there was a great deal in number of them, and their lives were at risk. Now, I don't believe that that's going to happen here. So let's say, for instance, someone says, well, they're an LGBTQ person, or they're a trans person, and they will, in their particular country, they will be beaten, they will be persecuted. So you might want to say, okay, we are a country that's supposed to take in people who feel threatened, but how many? You know what I mean? So you might say,
and
okay,
your Kenya example, the LGBTQ example coming together. Kenya is one of those places that, whilst it probably won't take action against gay people in its community, is non-supportive of the LGBTQ community.
Well, you could say that Texas isn't either. Are we looking for Texas refugees?
Yeah.
What we do is we look at the country. Like, for instance, we have had a lot of refugees, so-called refugees, asylum seekers come from India. They first try to open the door with the student thing, and if they can get, or tourist thing, and once they get here, they claim asylum. They know if they do, this will take a long time and they'll be able to settle in for a while. And the longer they can wait and hang in, the more likelihood they'll be able to stay, and they'll bring their friends and their family. And just like Premier Smith has said, when even if they're a temporary worker and they get a contract to work for a year as a temporary worker and fully expected to go back, what they do then is they bring their family, they bring the wife and the kids and the grandfather, and that puts a health and strain on the health system, because now who's going to take care of these people? Obviously, you're not going to let them be sick. You got to put their kids through school. You're not going to let the kids just run around and not have an education, but that puts a strain on the system. So what we do have now is we're beginning to have a more practical view of immigration. Now, you can say what you want about the big orangutan down south there, but he did stop asylum seeking and refugees coming over the border from Mexico or other places. They did stop it. So they had 10 million coming in under the 4 years of Biden, 10 million people, and maybe even more. The estimates could be even much more than that, but a minimum of 10 million people that came in. They had no ability to screen them or test them, or they had to release them into the population. They were then taken by places like Texas and moved around the country. You want asylum seekers, you got them. And so they were able to stop this stream of illegals that were not really refugees. They were just economic refugees looking for a better place to hang out, trying to get a better life. Who could blame them? But that puts a strain on the system. It doesn't, you lose control of the system. And Canada appears to have lost control of its system. All they're doing here is trying to redress the matter. Yeah. I think the refugee thing has been exploited and abused, and I think probably we just gotta, do what we're supposed to do. Are you really a refugee or not? And how many refugees do we think? And if we put a number on it, that's dumb too, because you could have 100,000 refugees come out of a battle-torn area like Ukraine or Gaza 1 year and not have any the next year, but still trying to make up your numbers. Yeah, that's kind of dumb.
Yeah,
and
putting numbers.
And here's the problem too. What about Ukrainian refugees? We have a lot of them, and they had a certain time limit. They could stay 3 years. Well, now that's going to be extended, right? So you can't send them back into the war-torn area, right? You want your women and children here in a safer spot. Will they? Are we going to? Obviously, when things settle down there, a lot of them won't want to go home, but a lot of them established a life here already.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Are you going to force them to leave and go home?
Yeah, that's a big question, because once they're here, even if they claim, even if in the war scenario, exactly, the Ukrainians were supposed to be here for 3 years, but the war's gone on for a lot longer than 3 years now.
Well, yeah, it's just past its 4-year mark.
Yeah, exactly. And not with no seemingly resolution in place. And so how long is temporary in a situation like that?
Yes, and what do you do? Now you've taken a child that was, let's say he or she was 4 years old when they showed up. Now they're 8 years old. They've learned English, all their friends.
And they're Canadian.
And they're all Canadian, right? Yeah. They may be speaking in the community here, the Ukrainian community, but they are also everyday Canadian kids right now. Do you want to really interrupt their life and say, okay, you got to go to the war-torn, you got to go to the rubble-filled cities of Ukraine and try to get an education when the resources will be very lean.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So what do you do? And you could think of anywhere else in the world, the same idea. whether it's a Syrian refugee, whether it's a Cambodian refugee. They had a little spate there on the border, but then do you accept an Indian refugee? Somebody's come over and claiming refugee status, asylum seeker,
Well, a
when they
lot.
came from democracy. Where do you draw the line?
Yeah, as I say, for example, LGBTQ status may well impact a lot of people that otherwise would not have any issues about their personal safety. And that's one example.
Is it up to us to save the world though?
Fair question.
We have our own LGBTQ issues that we haven't really resolved, have we?
And again, the LGBTQ was only one issue about many people that could well be, even in a democracy, could well be at risk. One set, a set of is one set of people that even in a democracy could be at risk.
Yes. So anywhere, like you say, you could be in Texas, and you're not going to have, or some of the southern MAGA states in the States. You might find a lot of violence your way.
It's not.
What about a Black American, a Black American from Gary, Indiana, or some other city that's very violent? Do you accept them as an asylum seeker? Because obviously, yes, they live in a very violent environment where a Black person is 5 times more likely to be shot or a victim of crime. Do you now say, okay, well, that means to have asylum? Because you say, well, you can move anywhere else in the state, any part of the states, places that are less violent, but you maintain that you will not be accepted or can't afford or have ability to live in anywhere else that is not a poor and consequently more violent neighborhood. Now, do you take them in as an asylum seeker? They seem to have as much right to it as anyone else.
Yeah, and the question, of course, is that acceptance of refugee claims have ballooned massively over the last 6 years.
Yeah, that was the lead in the story. So it went from in 2018 it was 14,000, and last year it was 37,000. So it's more than doubled.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so let's leave it there and let's move on. Next question at hand is: can Ontario landlords control how many guests you can have as a residential tenant?
Oh, now I don't want to cast aspersions, but we find that new Canadians come to the country and then they fill their houses up with as many people as they can get into them, obviously because they need a place to stay, and they don't, and collectively they have enough money to be able to afford a house perhaps, but individually they don't. We hear stories when someone I knew was looking for a house some years ago. There were 7 Uber drivers living in the basement of the house, and the people who were selling the house were asking the people who were buying if they would be open to allowing the Uber drivers to stay there and pay rent.
Well, there is, you see, generally speaking, for example, if you have 100 people over for Christmas lunch, your landlord can't stop it. It might become a police problem, but if they're only there for the day, then you can't. Even the police wouldn't stop it. But if you have a dozen people living in your basement and they are paying you rent, there's 2 reasons why that would be illegal. One, because you're not allowed to profit on a rental property that you're in as a renter, and 2, it could be a question of overcrowding, which could be challenged.
There is a thing here, or even when you talk, of course, when you talk about people coming over for Thanksgiving dinner or something like that, and you've got a big family and And you're,
And obviously, I'm being
let's say
exaggerating by saying 100.
your apartment is very full. Let's call it. Let's zero in on an apartment. You got an apartment and it's very, very full. That's obviously different from people actually living there.
Yes,
Isn't it? That's a temporary thing. But even at that, we have fire regulations, don't we?
Yeah.
The fire chief might want to regulate how many people can be there. Just like if you rent a hall, how many people are allowed to go there according to the fire regulations.
Yeah.
So there's an issue there. But I think the real pressing issue is who is living there.
Yeah. If you've got 100 people coming over for a Christmas lunch or a Thanksgiving lunch, arguably you should be holding that in a hall anyway. But again, that's a temporary related issue and not something that's actionable against the tenant. But having people overcrowding is a separate issue entirely.
Yes. Yeah.
And even if your guests were to stay 1 or 2 nights extra, that probably wouldn't be an offense it wouldn't be an overcrowding related issue.
No, let's use some common sense here. What they're talking about is a house or an apartment or anything else, and how many people are living in it, and how many is it and why. Now, from the very beginning of immigration into this land or any other land, what we do find is an issue of overcrowding. Every new wave of immigrants comes in, and it's not very uncommon to find overcrowded residences, and that is still happening. And you hear about this all the time, where you have where somebody buys a house and they fill it up with all kinds of people. If you're an Indian, or somebody from Kenya or whatever, and you got a lot of friends, and you're able to buy a house, and you're pushed to rent it, and you may get a lot of your friends or family into that house, and you may have 10 people living in the basement on cots, sharing facilities. You may have 2 or 3 people to every room, that kind of thing. Is it safe?
Yeah,
that's are you inflating the requirements? Like usually residential areas are minimal amount of people per square mile, basically, or square meter, because that's why they're a residential area. You don't want overcrowding.
And
it's so you do not expect you don't expect 30 people living in the house next to you.
Yeah, and it's the difference between whether a person's a guest or a roommate.
Well, I don't think it makes much of a difference for the amount of people that are living in there.
Yeah.
Basically, if you could call them a guest or a roommate or you could give them any title at all. But if there are too many of them, how do you determine that? And who's going to determine that too? So obviously, if you got a house and then your next door neighbor has 30 people living in it, and there's 7 cars all jammed into the in front of the on the lawn and the driveway and that. So there's overcapacity. Who is to determine if that's overcapacity or not? Is it safe for that many people to live in that small of that area? Is it safe for them to get out in case of a fire? There has to be 2 means of egress from almost every place. But if you have that many people in a smaller place, is it reasonable to think if there is a fire, could they get out?
Well, yeah, and that's a fair question as well, but that's a health and safety issue, because, for example, if I had a dozen Uber drivers in my basement, that would be illegal, because I don't have any, they don't have any other way out. There's no means of egress. And of course I don't have a dozen Uber drivers in my basement, right? But but that's a fair point, and that's a safety issue.
So, so when they say can the Ontario landlords control how many guests you can have, and what is the definition of guest? Is a guest, like I've had guests here that stayed a week, right?
Yeah,
so
that's fine.
So I live in a condo and I get one parking spot, but to stay more than a week, when somebody else has a car, in the visitors, that's a bit of an issue for more than about a week, because it takes up a parking spot that others need to share.
Yeah, because
so you could so therefore, having a guest for more than a week is problematic for me because of that situation. Now I could have a guest, because I live in this place by myself. I can have a guest that lives here, as long as I want them to live. 1, 2, maybe 3, 4. How many though? How many of those so-called guests can stay, and for how long?
And the visitor parking spot, that's really meant because I have I come over, where you invite me over for tea, I come, stay a couple of hours, we chat, and I leave, right? That's what the visitor parking's really there for, not for the person who's staying 4 nights.
Yeah, I think the definition is clear, and it says here that the landlord, if you're having a big party, Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever, can the landlord come along? Let's say the landlord lives in your same building and he comes around and says, no, you be quiet, because I'm trying to get to sleep, so you're not allowed to be here. Is the landlord have that kind of authority?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it says here, there's no time limit for guests or who the guests are. So if they are not on the lease, even a common law would be considered a guest, or friends or family will be considered guests if they're not on the lease. When does a guest become a roommate? That's the next thing. Although there's no time limit for how long a guest can stay. In other words, you could have 7, in your apartment, you could have seven Uber drivers guests, in your house, your apartment. They're guests of mine, but they're Uber drivers, and they may pay me under the table or something, So the guests have stayed enough, become a roommate. So is there a time limit when the guests now then transition to a roommate? Should there be a specific
again,
time?
remember this though, as a residential tenant where you've got a lease and you're living in your apartment alone, and 3 years after you signed your lease you move your girlfriend in, that's perfectly legitimate.
Sure. It says right here, realtors say that tenants do not have an obligation to inform the landlord that someone else has moved in.
Yeah.
But how many? That's the whole point.
Yeah. But
you could have one move in. Like you say, you got your girlfriend move in, right? Great. Yeah. Great. Are they a guest, or are they a roommate, or what are they? You have any legal obligations there?
Yeah. And let's be clear about some of that, by the way. Moving it, if you live in a unit which is run by people like Niagara Regional Housing, moving your girlfriend in where the rent is paid by something like ODSP could actually impact your status and your rights to continue to live in that location.
Possible, but usually when people are in ODSP, they have trouble finding digs. Basically, quite often they have trouble finding place. So it's not likely that anywhere from the well department will say you got to get out of here. They're probably more happy that they have a place to live.
No, hang on. What I said to you is, if you're living somewhere in like Niagara Regional Housing, and so therefore your housing is guaranteed under the Housing Services Act, and you're on ODSP or something like that, there's 2 government departments that may have an issue with you moving your girlfriend or boyfriend in there.
Okay. All right, but let's get back to the issue.
Yeah.
Do the landlords have? Seems to be fewer definitions in how, and of course, the landlord is worried about their investment, the room or the apartment they rent. How much power does the landlord have? How much definition do you have? So you could very well find yourself in a situation, if you are a landlord and you have a 2-bedroom apartment that you've let out, and then you find that you have these so-called guests, but they're permanent guests.
Yeah.
How do you respond to that?
There is an application. There is a landlord application out there. There's an application out there which is about whether a person is a tenant or a guest.
Yeah, maybe, but who's going to go do that if it's a big problem? So what does
landlords do? Landlords do, and tenants have.
So what do you then think if there is a means by which to deal with this? Why was this article even written?
Yeah.
So what do you see in it? What do you see in this article?
Yeah, most people don't use the A1 or A2 application, which is to question whether they are a tenant or a tenant or a guest.
So why was this article written if the landlords are coming up with trying to figure out? Otherwise, the realtor says any lease clauses by landlords which attempt to limit the number of guests are not enforceable.
They're not.
The tenants are able to turn to the tenant board in cases the landlord oversteps. So basically, what you're saying there really doesn't make much difference. They may have form, this form, that form, any kind of form, but it's not enforceable.
Well, the A1 application.
The problem. You say that there is a solution. There
is an application
but this particular article says that pretty much implies what you said there is inconsequential.
Yeah. Well, essentially, there's an application you can put to the board, which is an A1 or A2 application, which is determining whether an occupant is a tenant or not. And if the occupant is determined not to be a tenant by the board, they can be removed.
Yeah, but it says here that a lot of that's unenforceable, and who's going to remove them? It seems that there is a problem, and
you can remove
what you just said. Seems to say there is no problem here at all. And yet you have this article here that says that the landlords have this continuous problem of people overstaying as guests.
I don't know that it's a massive problem, but the problem does exist.
It does exist. And you say that there's a solution to it, but this article says that whatever the landlord has available to them isn't working.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. 2 more things left on our show. An Edmonton woman had an 18-month battle with Equifax and TransUnion to fix her credit rating. Basically, what happened is she made an application. She went and looked at her credit score and had been fighting with Equifax and TransUnion to fix her credit rating. What had happened is she had recently paid off a credit card debt and nobody fixed it.
Okay. I couldn't open the article, so tell us all about it.
Oh, you couldn't open it? It's a CBC article. Okay.
Oh, well, I didn't get around to it for some reason. Let me see.
Okay. Yeah. Basically, it took her 18 months to fix this whole credit issue. She had a big credit card debt and some non-payment associated with it, and she'd even had a situation whereby they threatened to garnish her wages, seize her car, etc. If she didn't pay immediately, but she'd already paid the bill.
So this is just really just a human interest story. that whatever the credit rating here is, we're just fearful that she hadn't really paid her debts.
Yeah.
They haven't been able to sort that out. How often does this happen?
I think people do fall through the cracks. It's a case of falling through the cracks, I think.
So, what's the purpose of this article?
And here's the question: so if you've had a bad credit history for 10 years, and suddenly you pay your debts off, is the credit card company suddenly going to put you up to 800? Probably not.
No, because your credit rating's better. It takes a while to build that back up.
Yeah, and even if, because you were at 650, let's say, and and yes, you've had debts for the last 10 years, but all of a sudden you paid off your debts. Your credit rating may go up to 700, maybe even 720, 730, but it's not suddenly going to be 850 all of a sudden, is it?
I don't know. I always pay my bills. I've never had that problem. So I have known people have had problems with don't deal with their money very well. I mean, that's a common problem. We find people who when the credit card comes in, it says, and they've got a $3,000 bill, and it says on it, all you have to do is pay this $10. They think that's okay. They can't figure out that that's going to put them in bigger problems going forward. So I haven't had that problem. I am not in a situation where I've been behind the 8 ball because I haven't paid my bills. I always pay my bills. So I've never found myself in a position where my credit is questionable.
Yeah.
But in this particular case, is it implied in this article? You read it, I didn't. Is it implied in this article that the young lady, assuming she's young, had a bad credit history, but paid off her debts, but they haven't seemed to be recognized as being paid off, and she's still being charged for stuff that she's already paid off?
Yeah.
Is it because they have she's in the system as somebody
I have to ask this same question. So last year, the end of last year, I paid off my student loan. But yet, even last week, I got a request to pay my student loan.
Well, I've had a request to pay bills that I've already paid too. That's just a glitch, or so you just make a phone call and fix it. This lady obviously hasn't been able to do that.
Yeah. Yep. I don't know.
So sometimes there's mistakes being made. I've
All
been billed for stuff that I've already paid, and and then I phone them and say, "Hey, look, I already paid for that." "Oh, yes, we did. Sorry, mistake."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's curious. Especially when you've got debts.
Like I've been billed twice. A couple of times there was a mistake in the billing from I think it might have been Niagara Peninsula Energy. I was getting two bills a month, and I was paying them, and it actually turns out that I was by the time I figured out that they were double billing me, it was okay though, because it went into my account, and I had, once I looked into it, I could see that they made that mistake, but they were sending me 2 bills, and for a while I was paying them. And when I realized that I didn't have to do that, all it meant was I accumulated money in my account, basically.
Yeah.
So in the long run, I didn't have to go ask for them for having a refund, because the money was just there to pay the bill for the following month.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So. All right.
So basically, what is this? A cautionary tale about your credit and how to fix your credit?
Yeah, just to basically keep an eye on it. Okay. So let's move on. Bob Gale. There's a story out here in Niagara at large that says, Bob Gale said, "Can take my $240 and shove it." Right. Clearly, somebody who's very angry at Bob Gale, and Niagara Regional Council for Niagara Falls, a long-time retailer in gas, wanting to give me and every other property taxpayer across Niagara who rakes in $160,000 a year and a $240 check from out of the regional government reserve fund.
$240 million. Unfortunately, here he is even admittedly thinking that cynicism has crept into his thinking on this one. He sees that Bob Gale has decided that it might be a good idea for any household making less than $160,000 to get a rebate back on their tax bills, get $240. Now the fella says, I'm cynical about this. Bob Gale is a politician, and he's just trying to feather his own nest, make himself look good, get the votes needed for the next time coming. And then the person then goes on to argue that this money is coming out of the reserve fund, and the reserve fund is an important thing to keep the reserve fund up as high as it can go, because you don't know what sort of emergencies you're going to have.
Yeah,
I had a discussion just a couple of days ago here with the tenants in our. We had a meeting with the tenants here in my building, and had explained to them what the reserve fund was, because when they look at their monthly bills, their condo fees, there's a certain amount of that goes to this reserve fund, and it seems to be a lot of money in that reserve fund. And they're thinking, do we need to do that?
Yeah,
and of course, by law, we have to. There is no way out of it. We have to put money in the reserve fund, no matter what.
And essentially, let's say a bad thing happens, and let's say an engine part falls off an aeroplane and goes through the roof tomorrow. Suddenly, your condo, everybody in that condo, you want that reserve fund because that repairs that roof right away, right? Otherwise, it's like, Dave, and your neighbor and your neighbor and your neighbor, I need $15,000 off of you now, right?
Well, yeah, that's kind of it's more like, let's say the elevator went. Let's say you've taken your reserve fund and you spent it all, given it all back to everybody, and the elevator in the building breaks down, and that's going to cost you $200,000 to fix.
Yeah,
and you don't have that money.
Another one. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So that's the argument this guy's making. Now, as far as the condo I'm talking about, you have to, by law, put that reserve fund away. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
But here in this government, what Bob Gale wants to do is take that reserve fund and give back $240 to any household that's $160,000 or less. What this fella is saying is twofold. Number one, he is saying that might not be a good idea to tap into that reserve fund. We may need it farther on down the line. That's not a good idea.
Yeah, I get it.
On the other hand, he is cynically suggesting that Bob Gale is making himself look good by giving everybody back a $240,000. I disagree with this cynicism.
Yeah,
I disagree with this cynicism. I think Bob Gale honestly believes that the average person could really use $240 right about now. And I agree with him, because I go around every Monday to corner stores and pick up the money for the bingo and things of that kind. And I talk to the corner store owners. There's a drop in business. People don't have any money. I get that. I get that response from just about every corner store owner. People do not have money. Yeah. So they are tightening their belts. I think that this is an honest attempt by Bob Gale to give back some money to people who could really use the relief right about now. Can you imagine a family getting $240 right now? A family of four, or like you got a couple of kids, right? You could really do that. That could help with a bill. It could help with
what I want to know. What I want to know is
I haven't got a cynicism here with this one.
How would they know a family is deserving of this, because one of the things that local cities do not get, and local municipals, neither does the region, is they don't have our tax report, so they don't know what families are earning. They only know what we pay in tax.
Well, let's see what it says here. The conditions here. It says he says that I'll read the whole first sentence. Here is Bob Gale, a Niagara Regional Council from Niagara Falls, a longtime retailer in gas, wanting to give me and every other property taxpayer across Niagara who rakes in less than $160,000 a year a $240 check out of the regional government's reserve fund. What a magnanimous gesture on Bob Gale's part. And he says he won't take it. He doesn't want it. Now, he's made it clear that he feels a great measure. Now, you're asking, how do they know that? I don't know how they know that. Yeah. I don't know how they may know that. You may have to prove to them that. Who knows? But if you apply for that, in my mind, I don't have cynicism in this particular regard, because I know the guy. I don't know him very well, but I went to school with him in high school. I don't think he's looking to make himself look any better. I think this is when all the different counselors have got the feedback from their taxpayers and saying another 6.1% increase, another the city of Niagara Falls, another 3.2 or 4.4% increase, and another 6 from the region, et cetera, et cetera. I think that not only Bob Gale, but the other counselors will say, yeah, if we can give anybody a bit of relief, yeah, we should do that. It won't solve the ongoing problem of our huge tax debt and tax burden on our citizens, but it might give them a bit of a break and relief. So I don't think the cynicism belongs there in this particular case. I can understand why he's cynical about it, but I don't believe that cynicism is merited here. On the other hand, taking the money out of the reserve fund, yeah, I do have my doubts about that too, because his argument is reserve fund's a very important thing, and you don't want to whittle away at your reserve fund.
Yeah.
But if your reserve fund is very healthy, you may want to give your taxpayers a bit of a break and use some of that. Now, you can't keep continuing to do that. You can do it 1 or 2 times maybe, but in the meantime, people are really feeling the pinch right now. Is it a good idea? So I leave it with you. Is it a good idea to use that? Will it make a difference to the average
I think it
person?
might. It may make a difference, right? $240. If we get back $240, that basically it raises. Well, we wouldn't get it back anyway, because it will just impact our tax bill, but it will reduce the tax bill overall by a small amount.
Yeah. So I think it's a gesture. Remember, the elected officials are there to try to govern in the best way they can, and they're definitely going to be demanding money from us all the time, because taxes are the thing that makes the wheels go round.
Yeah.
Now this fella says no, don't do it. That reserve fund is too important. Others have said that our reserve fund has an abundance of money, and we can tap into it 1 or 2 times, and it won't make much of a difference. My question is, who's saying? Rick says what? Something about that's up to the province. LOL. Insurances. So you can go to New York City and get $40 an hour. What? Shoveling snow? Yeah. Yeah, you can. And guess what? You have to have 2 pieces of ID, because that's the law. Mandani, like they're freaking out on Mandani because he needs proof in order to hire somebody, but they're trying to conflate it with proof for voting. So they're saying, yeah, well, here you go. You don't need proof to vote, but you need proof to be hired. Well, that's the law. That's the federal law. It's not the New York City law. That's the federal law that says you have to have ID to be able to identify yourself so you can register, so your income taxes can be paid, and and so the government knows how much money you have made. So that is the law.
All right.
To be done. If you wanted to use illegals, you wouldn't do that.
Yeah. And Rick is basically saying that the tax bill is going to be 10% next year unless there's a change.
Yeah, and that's we didn't really get into it. Maybe a little more tomorrow. But are we really going to save money if we amalgamate? And that's the whole idea of the questions of amalgamation.
We'll cover the amalgamation question tomorrow. All right, and I think we'll have to call it quits at this point.
And I will bring up Gaza again, guys. Like we're in a situation now where people are still getting killed there. I don't know how much the Rafah border is being opened up, but still there are no journalists there. There are no journalists, and you've got a weirdo by the name of Huckabee who is a Christian Zionist. God, and he's supposed to be representative of the United States. In other words, he is already on the side of Israel. He's waiting for the end of days to come, like Christian Zionists do. And he's very little concerned about the average Palestinian. As a matter of fact, his whole idea, like, I don't think he's much of a Christian at all because he's a liar. Anyway, without further ado, I bid you adieu. Pray for peace.
Yeah.